Hi guys, this is Mark's Tech Vlogs on YouTube, and today I'm going to bring you guys a slightly different video. And if you've watched my videos before, you'll know that basically in my day job, because this isn't my day job, I work as a web developer. And it's something I really enjoy, and it's also something I tend to do in my spare time, just for projects that I'm interested in. And recently I developed a plugin for HomeBridge. If you haven't come across HomeBridge before, it fits perfectly into this channel. So HomeBridge is a Raspberry Pi based operating system. You can run it on things like Windows and Mac as well, but it works best on a little Raspberry Pi because then it's running all the time. And HomeBridge is a way of getting your non-Apple HomeKit devices into Apple HomeKit. So HomeBridge basically creates a HomeKit compatible bridge, and then you can use a whole variety of plugins to add things into HomeBridge. So for example, Tour devices which aren't natively compatible with HomeKit, there is an official plugin for HomeBridge, so you can install the Tour HomeBridge plugin and get your Tour devices working with HomeKit. And this is great for those people who've got kind of more budget things. And of course, a Raspberry Pi is a budget device, but HomeBridge is certainly something for more advanced users when it comes to smart homes. And recently I've been working on a review of the Locked Touch smart lock for this channel, and in doing that I basically wanted to see if there was a way of getting the Locked Touch into HomeBridge, because there isn't an official plugin. There are a couple of plugins out there that other people have created, but they didn't seem to work as well as I wanted them to, and I actually couldn't get one of them installed. So what I thought I'd do is I thought I would dive in and create a HomeBridge plugin. The problem is the documentation for creating a HomeBridge plugin isn't particularly good, and also there's not many tutorials out there, so I thought I'd make a quick tutorial showing you how to get started. So if you look here, I am on GitHub, so on HomeBridge / HomeBridge plugin template, and this is something created by HomeBridge as a kind of starter for you, although it is a little bit out of date in places, which is where I ran into some issues and the reason I want to make this video. So this video is going to be about getting up and running with creating a HomeBridge plugin, and I will also show you a little bit of the code I made for the Locked plugin so you can see how some of it kind of plays out in real life. So to start with, you want to go to this GitHub page, and you either want to click use this template and create a new repository, which you can use with your GitHub account to create a repository straight away, or for the sake of this demo, I'm going to click code and I'm going to download it as a zip. So if I come across to my downloads here, I've got that there, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename it. I'm going to call it HomeBridge Demo. Now what we want is we want this to be on our Raspberry Pi. It doesn't matter where, and I actually have a slightly unusual HomeBridge setup. So what you normally do with HomeBridge is you flash a memory card and that runs the operating system on your Raspberry Pi. I actually have HomeBridge running on Raspbian because I also want some of the other local server features, and I've got some cron jobs running, so my Raspberry Pi does various things for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going into my Raspberry Pi here, which I have connected to my Mac, so it appears under locations using something called NetterTalk. You can set that up on your own, and it's really good because you can literally just browse your Raspberry Pi folders and transfer files across nice and easily. For me, this is really useful because my Raspberry Pi doesn't have a screen or keyboard or mouse attached to it. So I'm just going to put this Raspberry Pi demo on my desktop here. So I'm going to drag that across there, and that will copy over. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to get into this HomeBridge demo folder and run npm install. And there's a few ways you might do this. You might load up your Raspberry Pi just on a different screen and work on it on there. You might use something like VNC to connect to it. I have configured mine to work with SSH, so I'm going to use a terminal window and I'm going to SSH to my Raspberry Pi. So I just put SSH, my username, which is just Mark, and then at the IP address. So for me, that's 192.168.4.79. It will prompt you with password. And here I am in my home folder. So if I just do ls to list that directory, so yeah, so you can see that this ls function lists the files exactly as they are here. So I put the HomeBridge demo on my desktop, so I'm just going to cd to desktop and HomeBridge demo. Okay, so I'm now in that folder. So the first thing I want to do is just run npm install. And that's going to take a little while, so while that's happening, I'm going to open this in my code editor. So I use VS Code, so I'm just going to drag it down there. There is a README that comes with this. It's easy to see in the browser because it's styled nicely. So basically it says run npm install, which we've done, And then what you want to do is go into package.json and change the name, display name, repository URL, and bugs URL. So we can do that. Now I'm going to call this HomeBridge demo. Okay, so we're going to call this HomeBridge demo. I'm going to call this demo. And you need to remember what you call this. So we've done that. I'm not going to change these URLs because I haven't set up a repo for this. What you might want to do if you have downloaded it like me is you might want to run sudo rm-rf.git just to remove the traces of that previous repository. So I've done that. If we go back to this, it says you need to update the plugin details in settings.ts. So this demo plugin from HomeBridge is written in TypeScript, which is basically an opinionated JavaScript. If you don't know TypeScript already, you can write plugins in just normal JavaScript, and actually this demo, whilst useful, is probably a little bit overly complicated in places, but that doesn't matter too much, and I'll talk through what we've got here in a second. So we're going to go into settings.typescript, and we're going to update this. So it's currently example HomeBridge plugin. I'm going to change that to demo HomeBridge plugin, and I'm going to change that to demo because that's what we called it in our package JSON. So I can save that. Okay, so this is also a good time in our setup process just to rename some things so it makes a bit more sense for what we're doing. So I'm going to go into index.typescript first, and I'm going to change this up here from example HomeBridge platform to demo HomeBridge platform. And I've changed that down there, so I'm going to change that as well. I'm just going to hit save. Next, we're going to go into platform. And of course, we've just changed example HomeBridge platform to that. So I'm just going to do a find and replace. So I'm going to put that up there and write example. So that appears once. So I'm just going to change that as well. And then we also have in platform accessory something here called that's important up here. So again, we're just going to find and replace all of that. And then this platform accessory file also creates something called an example platform accessory. So I'm going to change example to demo. And again, I'm going to copy that onto my clipboard and run a find and replace just to check that. Sorry, I'm going to put example there and just check that I have changed that everywhere in this file, which I have. So I'm going to go back to platform and I can see that example platform accessory is actually here 3 times. So I'm just going to hit replace all. So that says we're going to bring in demo platform accessory rather than example from platform accessory because that's where we just renamed that class. And then we'll just check that index hasn't got it either, so that's fine. What you will find is if you miss something out, when you come to build this and compile the TypeScript, it will let you know. So let me just talk you through what we've got here. So the HomeBridge demo plugin is set up to basically create some dummy devices for you, just so you can see it in action. And you kind of need to be familiar with classes to kind of understand this, but basically you have this class for your platform. And this is created once for your entire project. And what we've got here is a constructor. This is what happens when it first loads. So you can see that it's login a we finished setting it up message. And most of this code is annotated. And basically when it's finished launching, it then calls this function called discover devices. And if we go down to find it, we can see that this function is quite big, but it does a few things in a really simple way. And again, it is annotated, but basically it creates an array of example devices. It then goes over that array. It creates a unique identifier for it. And then it checks to see if that accessory already exists. And if it does, it grabs the accessory from the cache of HomeBridge. And if it doesn't, it creates a new one. And for both of those, it creates this platform accessory class. And we'll look at that in a second because that's kind of where all the magic happens. Now you don't have to separate this all out separately like they've done here, but that is good practice just for keeping stuff separate and easy to follow. So of course in real life you wouldn't actually have an array of devices like this unless you're creating fake ones. You might grab something from the settings, which I'll show you in a second, or you might connect to an external service like Tour or something and grab all of the devices from there. So for each of these, so the example device first one, which is bedroom, second one, which is kitchen, it then creates this platform accessory class for each one. And this really is where the kind of magic happens. So I'll take you through this very, very briefly. So at the top here, we've got example states, so whether it's on and how bright it is. So this is like a mock light bulb, and there's also a motion sensor as part of this as well. So again, we've got a constructor up here, and this constructor does a few things initially that you have to do. So what it does first is it creates some characteristics that you have to have. So it creates a manufacturer, a model, and a serial. And this is what appears in your Apple Home app. And then it creates what we call services. And services are basically things this device can do. So each time a service is created, it does this. So it says this.service, which is the variable we are assigning this service to. And it basically says, if this service already exists, use that. If it doesn't already exist, create a new one. So we've got get service, which is where we check if it exists, and if not, we add one. And that comes from platform.service.lightbulb. And we can see all of the services in the HomeBridge documentation. So if we go to developers.homebridge.io and look at service types, we can see lightbulb just here. And the documentation for each of these service types tells you which characteristics are required. So a light bulb, for example, can be on or off, and also optional ones. So maybe you can set a brightness of a light bulb, or a color temperature, or a hue, or a name. And each one does have some basic example code you can kind of look at to get an idea of what goes on. So if we go back to this, so we've created the light bulb service. We then assign the display name. So it's example display name. So of course for each one that comes from here, so kitchen or bedroom, and that's what's displayed in HomeBridge and on your Apple device. Each service, as this says, must implement the minimum required characteristics and any extra ones you want. So for example, the light bulb one has to have an on function. And if I click on, it tells me that is a Boolean, so it's true or false. And it tells me it supports get and set. So some of these only support get, which is to get the status. Others support a function for setting as well. So this supports both get and set. So what's going on is we're registering the handler for that. So we're saying this.service.getCharacteristic on, and we're saying on set. So when we need to set it, we grab a function called set on, which is further down. And then on get, we grab a function or method called get on. So we've got set on and get on. And if we look at what these do, they basically assign that value and log what's going on. So if we look at the get on, for example, it's just an asynchronous function that grabs the state from our states variable at the top here. So we go, whether it's on or not. And it logs it and it returns it. The only other stuff going on here, just to mention, is it creates some motion sensors as well. And it creates a set interval just to trigger these on and off, just so you can see some changes. So this is all about showing you basically how things work in a very basic sense. Of course, when you come to actually use this, you will strip this out and put your own things in. The only other thing to note here is if you're going to have another service attached to this, so maybe your light bulb also has a temperature sensor in there. Let's have a look. There we go, temperature sensor. You would also need to register that service, and you do it in a very similar way as this line of code here, but you couldn't do this and change that to temperature sensor. Because if you do that, what you're basically doing is you are wiping over this service variable. So in doing that, doing this here, what you do is you get rid of that. So you basically delete everything that's part of this service and replace it with that, which isn't what you want to do. So what you need to do if you're adding a second service is you come up to the top here and you declare it. So we'd say private, and we're going to call this temperature service, and it's of type service. If you don't know TypeScript, don't worry too much about this end bit. You also don't actually have to have that there, so you can just do it like that if you want to, just like you would in a normal class. I'm going to keep there just because that's a good convention. And then we've declared that up here, which means when we come to assign it here, we can say this.temperature service is that. So that's how you set up more than one service. I'm just going to delete that line of code. I'm going to delete that as well. I'm just going to save. So this is now ready for us to build and ready for us to run. Now, if you look back at the documentation for the README, it says you can run npm link to be able to link it to HomeBridge for development after you've run npm run build. So I'm going to go back to my terminal. I'm just going to run npm run build in here. And that runs the task that basically compiles all of the TypeScript. And what that does is in your HomeBridge folder, which is where we are, so in HomeBridge demo, that's going to create a new folder in here called dist. And that does take a little bit of time. And it's also at this point, if there's any issues with your code, it will flag that there as well. And that means you can go back and fix it and work out where any problems are. And it hasn't flagged anything, it's compiled it. We can see our dist folder here with all of our JavaScript files, which are nicely compiled from our TypeScript. Now, the instructions say in order to get it into our HomeBridge instance, we can run npm link. Now, this doesn't work. And I think that's because HomeBridge has been updated since this was written and no one's updated this documentation. And so what you actually have to do is you have to run a different command. So what you have is you have a command called hb-service, and this must be run on your Raspberry Pi. And you need to run this as sudo. So sudo hb service, if I just do status as an example, what that does is it says HomeBridge service, what's the status? So it's testing it. It tells me a port it's running on my local environment, on my Raspberry Pi, and it says HomeBridge is running. Within this HomeBridge demo plugin folder, I can run sudo hb service link, which will do the same as this npm link, but actually work. Before I run that though, I'm just going to show you something else in package, because it does say you can watch for changes and build automatically. And that's using the npm run watch command, which is found in package.json. And what that does is it runs build and link and node1. And of course this isn't going to work. So I'm going to change this to sudo, I'm going to change this to hb service link and save that. So what I can do if I want Raspberry Pi to restart is instead of running sudo hb link, I can run npm run watch with sudo. So for now I'm just going to run hb service link. If I was to try and run that at this point, now I've run that link command, it would kick off because it'd say, well, actually, we're already doing this, we already got a link. So in order to be able to run that command, what you need to do is run sudo hb service unlink within your plugin folder. And that would then allow you to run the watch command. I'm not going to do that. Okay, so now we've run our link command. If we come into our Raspberry Pi and HomeBridge in the browser and we click plugins, you can see that HomeBridge demo is now there. If you hit settings, you can see the settings for this actual application, and I'll show you how these are set up. So if you look here, we've got name and it's required, and it's got this value of example dynamic platform before we've put anything in there. And this comes from this file over here in our plugin called config.schema.json. And you've got the name of the plugin up there, and then you've got properties. And these properties are the things that appear in that list. So you can see we've got name, it's a string, it's required, and that's the default. And that's of course what we can see there. If I show you my HomeBridge locked plugin, you can see that I've got a few more here. So I've got things like name, string, your lock name, I've got local key ID, I've got key, and some of these are passwords as well, just so they're asterisked out once the user has put something in. And this is how you might use this in real life. And then you've also got a thing here called header display, which is where you can add a bit of text which appears just up here. So that's how you get started with this HomeBridge demo package and kind of get it up and running initially. And of course, once you've got it initially up and running with this link command, which you must run hb service link, not npm link, and it's in your Raspberry Pi, you can make changes, you can start detecting the devices you want, you can console log, and that appears out in the HomeBridge logs here. And that's kind of how you get up and running initially. Couple of things just to mention very briefly. If you were to make a change, so let's say for example you changed this discover devices to actually discover the devices you want, what you'd do is you'd need to come up here and run npm run build again, and then you would need to go into your Raspberry Pi and hit restart. Now if you were running that npm run watch command, it would kind of build automatically and automatically restart your Pi for you. To be honest, I quite like to save quite often when I'm coding, and that would trigger lots of restarts, and my Raspberry Pi HomeBridge is actually used for other things. So what I tend to do when I've been doing this is I have just run npm run build when I'm ready, and then restarted the Raspberry Pi myself in the web interface, which doesn't really take much longer, and I found it just means I can keep a better eye on what's going on, but that's personal preference really. So that's how you get started with this HomeBridge demo plugin, which has been created by HomeBridge as kind of like a boilerplate for you. If this looks like really intimidating, you can just do this with a single JavaScript file, and a really good plugin to give you an example of that is this HomeBridge dummy plugin. So if I just scroll across here and click the link for that, if you look at this repo on GitHub, you can see that this project literally has a README, the config schema, index, and package.json. So if I click into index, basically all of the stuff that's going on in this demo plugin in src in these 4 files happens all in this one file. So this might be a nice starting place if you're feeling a bit intimidated by the kind of source folder and all of that. The other thing I'll just show you is if you look at my HomeBridge locked plugin, if I go into the source folder here and look at platform accessories, you can see that I have got some extra things going on up here, and you might want to have a look at that just to see what's going on for my lock. I've also got an API call that happens as part of this using Axios, and I've also got a webhook that gets fired from locked, which you see here. And then just a final thing to say really is that this documentation from HomeBridge isn't great at times. It kind of gives you a rough idea of what's going on, but it doesn't really tell you everything. So what I've found in kind of trying to dive into this and build this locked plugin that I've just shown you very briefly is that the trick is to look at other people's plugins. So for example, if you are building a lock plugin, then maybe you want to look at another company who've already got one. So I found the TT lock repo and the Switchbot repo were really good places to look to see how they've done things. And you can cross-reference it with this documentation, but it's a little bit easier if you're looking at things other people have done because you can see it in action a bit more. So I hope you guys have found this video helpful if you're trying to get started with this and struggling, especially as the README for this is a bit out of date in places. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If it's helped you out, there is a link below where you can buy me a beer, which would be great. And also, if you want to see tech reviews and HomeKit stuff, you can subscribe to this channel. If you'd like to see more kind of coding stuff around this, let me know, and I might make some more videos like this. And of course, if you've got any questions, do stick them below and I'll try and help you out if you're getting stuck. And then final thing to say is I have linked my HomeBridge locked GitHub below, so you can go and have a look at that code as well. I'll see you guys again soon.